This is the story of a tiny aquarium that I set out to build in this drink dispenser. I'm going to show you the process, and I'm going to tell you exactly how it went wrong. I got this container at a local hobby shop for around $3. The first thing that I did was to give it a good clean, inside and out, with just a bit of tap water. I water tested it, and the tap didn't leak. I then contemplated what kind of ecosystem I was going to create. I wanted it to be a home for shrimp. I collected some wood from around the house and opened up my box of rocks. The creative juices started flowing, and I was ready to start working on the aquarium. I started with the substrate. I used a mix of old sand and gravel that was left over from other projects. This mixture was meant to bulk up the substrate and give additional surface area for beneficial bacteria to breed. I added a handful of crushed coral to increase the hardness of the water. This is good for shrimp. Next, I added a layer of aqua soil. This is a great growing medium for aquatic plants and would provide additional nutrients for future shrimp. I banked the substrate towards the back of the aquarium. This tricks the eye, making the aquarium look deeper. I then started messing around with the hardscape. With the spiderwood, I wanted to create something that looked like a root structure, with a vanishing point above the tank, as if a terrestrial plant was growing down into the aquarium. I experimented with different layouts, with different types of rocks, and eventually settled on using dragonstone. I fiddled with different arrangements of the hardscape until I found something that I was happy with. I then removed the spiderwood so that I could proceed with the next step. I wanted to cover this thing with moss. I retrieved some Java moss from one of my other tanks. I kept it on the wireframes that it came on, knowing I would eventually use it in a project like this. I sprayed the moss down to keep it wet, as I prepared it. I decided to wet the spiderwood as well, hoping that the moss would better stick to it. I used a spool of green thread to wrap the moss tightly onto the spiderwood. This was a painstaking process. The moss didn't want to stay put as I attached it. It took me a while, but eventually I wrapped all of my moss onto the wood. To be honest, it was a very relaxing process. Eventually, I had something that I was really happy with. I think it's pretty cool, and I can't wait to see how it looks when the moss grows in and covers the thread. I then secured the wood to the dragonstone by wedging small pieces of cotton pads into contact points between the rocks and wood, and soaking them with superglue. When cyanoacrylate superglue dries, it is totally fish and plant safe. I continued to keep the moss wet and ended up completely obscuring the interior of the aquarium, so I quickly wiped it down. Next, I continued the substrate, adding sand to cap the aqua soil. This would keep the nutrient layer locked down, preventing the water column from becoming too nutrient rich, which could lead to algae. I then added scatter gravel. I added a few pieces intentionally, but most of it I just let fall where it wanted. Scatter gravel adds texture and color to the substrate, which creates more interest and variation. At this point, everything was going to plan with the aquarium, and I was really happy with it. Unfortunately, there was already one looming problem with the tank. Can you guess what it is? Take a moment and let me know in the comments. While you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video. I next began to gather plants and trimmings from my other aquariums to propagate in this new tank. I started by planting some dwarf Sagittaria. At this scale, I envisioned it would be a great background plant, with its long leaves reaching towards the surface. I also experimented with some trimmings of Juncus repens, adding them to the midground. Then I added some baby Java ferns that I harvested from larger plants. In the foreground, I added some tiny trimmings of pearlweed. At this point, I decided to fill up the tank to see how the plants were looking. This is where the problem revealed itself, and it ruined this project for me. Do you see it? It's those blurry strips on the corners of the dispenser. From the top it looks fine, but as you move down, everything inside is blurry and obscured. All the time that I put into this aquarium felt wasted, and I felt a little depressed. This left me with only one option. I decided to start over. I needed a different vessel. This project wasn't over. Far from it. It was just the beginning. I'm a little bit sad that the drink dispenser didn't work out, but that's life. Sometimes things don't go as planned, but that's okay. We learn from our mistakes and we move on. I'm going to take this as an opportunity to create something even better than my first design. Join me next week for part 2 of this project. I'll be using all of the same materials and nothing will go to waste. I'm excited for the next step.